Diagweev Galer Accordia, August Foilter Road. Welcome to Be My Guest with me, Mary Honan, on Lear Media, supporting the Yellow Elephant suicide prevention organization in Georgia. Now, my wonderful guest today is Tom Curren, who is the face of the Right to Die debate in Ireland. He joined the board of Exit International in 2010. In 2013, Tom's partner of 25 years, Mary Fleming, took a landmark case to Ireland's High Court and later to the Constitutional Supreme Court, arguing that as a disabled sufferer of MS, she had a constitutional right to receive assistance to die. Both courts dismissed Mary's case. However, the legal action put voluntary euthanasia and assisted suicide on the political map of the country. Mary Fleming died in December 2013 of MS, and since her death, Tom has become an active campaigner, not only for the right to die in Ireland, but for drug reform, including the use of medical marijuana. And in November 2020, Tom established the Irish Medicinal Cannabis Council. Now, please welcome Tom to the show. Hello, Tom.
Hello.
How are you?
I found out more about myself as you introduced me.
We're finished. But Tom, I was so sorry when Mary died. Can you tell us, I suppose, about Mary and how you met, and bring us up to, I suppose, date with the story?
Yeah, well, I suppose we met accidentally, as most, I suppose, an awful lot of couples do. We were both divorced and both living on our own. And I don't think either of us were looking for, I suppose, a relationship at that stage. And as soon as we met, we realized that we had something, a lot in common.
Yeah.
And it didn't take very long for us to realize that we'd like to be together.
Yeah.
So within a couple of weeks, I suppose, of meeting, Mary was, while she had MS, she was she had a relapse and remitting, which meant she would have a relapse every maybe year or something. But during the time when she wasn't having a relapse, it wasn't noticeable that she had MS, apart from a slight problem with her walk, which could have been anything. It could have been a bad leg or anything like that. But she decided to tell me, as she put it herself, to give me the opportunity to walk.
Yeah.
And the reasoning behind that was that when she was diagnosed with MS, her marriage broke up because her husband then just couldn't take the idea of Mary becoming disabled. And she wanted to give me the same opportunity rather than getting in too deep before I found out. Anyway, I didn't walk. And as I suppose the MS progressed, Mary moved from relapse or remitting into progressive. And she was one of the unlucky people that MS did progress very rapidly, meaning that about, what would it be, 12, 14 years before she died, I gave up work completely. To
be her carer.
To become her carer. Now, at first, that was great to a certain extent because Mary, we could still get out, we could still do things. Yeah. And we had a wonderful life together.
Yeah.
And we really enjoyed that early part. But as the MS took more and more control over Mary, it became much more difficult. And it really became a 24-hour job, 7 days a week to look after Mary. When she died, the only parts of her body that she had any control over were her eyes and her mouth. Her swallow was practically gone. She had lost control of everything else. But during this time, she said at one stage that if the MS got to the point where she had no quality of life, then she didn't want to continue.
Yeah.
And because I knew that Mary was a very sincere person and wouldn't say things lightly, I knew that she was serious.
Yeah.
And that's how our journey, I suppose, in the whole right to die area came about. The only legal option that was available to us at the time was to travel to Switzerland. And that's still the only legal option available to anybody in Ireland. Switzerland law allows for a person to get assistance there. But they're one of the few countries in the world that have assisted dying that allow people to travel to the country to avail of it. They, in fact, are the only country in the world where there are many countries that allow their own residents assisted dying. Switzerland allows people to travel.
Did you know from the beginning that she was really this was the way she wanted to be? That she wanted to go on her own terms rather than to suffer, or was it something that as she gradually deteriorated, that she started to think more and more about? And how difficult was it for you? I know what it's like to watch the most significant person in your life vanish before your eyes, and in many cases quicker than you could have possibly imagined. What do you say to people who struggle with that idea that there might be a cure tomorrow? What will happen if she dies today and they find a cure tomorrow, or she gets better, or she would have got better tomorrow?
Well, to be honest, when people say things like that, I don't really say anything to them, because that's their belief. Yeah. And if that's what they want to believe, then I support their belief and their willingness to eke, as I put it, to eke out every second of life, no matter how grim that second, the second after may be. Yeah. And I completely support their right to do that. And they should get all the support, the palliative care support, the hospice support that's necessary for them to be as comfortable as possible. But there are people like Mary who don't want to eke out every second of life, yeah, who want to decide that, or who want to have the right to decide that when they feel their time has come, then they should get assistance to do that. Now, the assistance part is the bit that causes the problems. Because here in Ireland and in a lot of other countries as well, suicide has been legal since 1993. So there is no legal impediment to anybody, whether they're sick or not, providing they're rational. There's no legal impediment to anybody taking their own life. It's how you go about that. Yeah. And most people in Mary's situation want a peaceful and quick death. They don't want to linger on. They don't want to die in pain, which is what they're trying to avoid.
Yeah.
And that's the part that requires the assistance, because that's not very easy for an ordinary person or for any person to organize for themselves.
I'll be honest with you, Tom, when I think back on my own situation, I often think, was it cruel watching my mum suffer the way she suffered and not have offered that or not? She knew I would never have done something like I could never have. I didn't want to ever see her go, no matter what the circumstances were. I just wonder, at times, I think, was I cruel to have watched her suffer like that?
That when love is involved, to me, love is preparing to do things for that the other person wants without thinking of yourself.
Yeah.
If the other person wants this for them, then to me, part of love is to provide whatever they want and need and want for themselves. Yeah. And to put your own feelings aside for that is to me what love is about. If you're thinking of yourself and you don't want them to die and you want them to be around and you don't want to bear this, that, or the other thing, it's selfishness.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. But look at it from the other person's point of view and what they want. And to me, the loving of that person is to provide for them what they want. And even if that means providing them the assistance to end their life, which I was quite prepared to do for Mary. And I've said that hundreds of times.
It's a very selfless thing. It's a very selfless thing, which is what I said to you at the start.
It's all about love. It's not selfless. It's about the fact that whether you love the person or not, it's a definition of love. In an awful lot of cases, people think that they own people because they're in a relationship and it's their feelings they're constantly thinking of and the other person not upsetting their feelings.
Yeah.
Love is when you forget your own feelings and think of what the other person needs. And this is one of those situations where that's so important.
But you said you were very involved in Exit. Can you explain? Firstly, Tom, I agree 100% with you on the cannabis, 100% on the medical cannabis. It's a shocking state of affairs in this country that we do not have that people can't just walk in to their doctor and be prescribed with medical cannabis, which to me doesn't have any, it's only got medicinal purposes for people who need it. What, yes. Would you agree?
Absolutely, yes. And again, I've said lots of times that there were two things that kept Marty alive, two drugs, and they were both illegal. we grow our own cannabis for years before Marty died, and it was the best medicine she had. And I learned an awful lot of, I mean, I knew nothing about either subject when Marty approached them, but we came across the cannabis situation through people in America. It was before it would ever came on the map here.
Yeah.
And we grew it ourselves in our little cottage, which I'm sitting in at the moment in Wicklow.
It looks lovely.
It was our best medicine. The other medicine was when we imported our end-of-life drugs. And once she had those, she knew she was in control. She knew that at any stage she could make that decision and she could die. And she could die peacefully. And when she had both of those, she just got on with living.
And how closer do you think that we are going to get, Tom, to, how will I put it, to getting medical cannabis legalized in this country? Because I just don't, I've never taken, I've never smoked or drank in my life. I've never been adventurous like that. But I absolutely fundamentally agree with a person being able, I've seen the effects, certainly with Tourette's and cancer and other conditions that cannabis, medical cannabis can actually help with.
Yes.
And Dragnet syndrome and all that. And I mean, it was shocking that child's mother had to go to the Netherlands to get her help. And she, you know, how far do you think we are away from getting that legalized in this country?
I think unfortunately we're a long way away from it.
Really?
And there's a recent situation which has been going on for 5 years of the Medical Cannabis Access Program, and that was introduced 5 years ago. The first person to receive anything on it was just this year, and it's now due for review. So, but the biggest obstacle, I think, is this stigma that people have of cannabis, or drugs in general, illegal drugs being dangerous. But almost all pharmaceutical drugs are illegal as well. You know, you can't just go down to Tesco's and buy them.
But they're less harmful than cigarettes.
Absolutely, yes, and alcohol.
And alcohol.
Yeah.
You know, and yet they're legal.
Yes. Yeah. But unfortunately, there's two big obstacles to getting cannabis available as a medicine here. And the biggest one is the medical profession.
Yeah.
The medical profession don't know enough about it. And I've said at numerous meetings, both here and in Europe and things like that, that if the medical profession don't want to be involved, move out of the way.
Yeah.
Let us get on with it. We know more about it than they do. So let us get on with it. And that's what's happened in a lot of other countries, where the clubs are able to provide the product and provide for the patients themselves. Mm. And I mean, that's the way it's done with alcohol. You don't have to go to a doctor and get a prescription for alcohol. You can go down to the pub and get it. Cannabis is no more dangerous than alcohol.
No, and probably less dangerous.
Absolutely less dangerous. And it, to the best of my knowledge, apart from cleaning a wound, I don't think alcohol has any medicinal properties. But
maybe Guinness. They say Guinness is supposed to be good for your.
Well, there's iron in it or something, isn't that right?
There's supposed to be something in it to help you.
You used to get Guinness when you donated blood to replace the iron. Yeah, a bottle of Guinness. Anyway, one of the first, I suppose, references of cannabis being used as a medicine publicly here was when Marty's book was published, and part of that was how good it was for her and how we grew it ourselves and that sort of thing. And I was castigated for giving a sick person a dangerous drug. But that started a conversation about it as well. But in a lot of cases, it's not smoked. It's processed into oils. The product that's used medicinally is of no value to the recreational market. Yeah. It's a totally different market to the medical use of cannabis. And it's usually processed into oils or into oil extract. for use as a medicine. So it's a totally different process.
I have a bottle of it outside in my kitchen. And the reason I have a bottle of it, by the irony, is I brought my dog back to the vet. And the vet says, because she's an elderly dog, that and she was panicking. And he said, here, he said, so he gave me the little bottle, but a little thing of that, and put it on her gums. Well, it was such a trial to get it on her gums. And it'll calm her down. And you cannot believe how calm she got.
I can believe, because I've seen it.
I was just looking, I was thinking, my dog is on cannabis. And he just thought it was very, very funny. But I just thought, well, it should actually be there for misfortunate people who are anything that will help somebody.
But there are literally hundreds of people or thousands of people in Ireland using cannabis as a medicine. And unfortunately, they're all breaking the law.
Yeah.
To me, that is crazy. If they're getting benefit from it and they're not doing anybody any harm, why not be allowed to provide for yourself? Yes.
If somebody is dying,
what
harm is it? I mean, you would give a dying man a cigarette.
Yes.
So why in God's name wouldn't you give somebody something if they feel that it's of medicinal benefit for them? I just don't see the logic of it. But Tom, your story and Mary's story is being turned into a play, and that stopped because you're getting famous.
No, Mary's famous.
More famous, both of you.
Oh.
Could she, I doubt she could ever have imagined in her life that her story would have had such an impact.
No, neither of us ever thought that that anybody would be interested in our lives. No. And it's great that things are happening because of the legacy that Mary left behind. It's a credit to her and the courage that she had.
But how difficult was it going back again, I suppose? How difficult was it for her, the whole legal process? Why did she feel that she had to keep going to fight this, especially when she was so ill?
Well, the legal battle to a certain extent wasn't for Mary. And this is something that she said herself. I appeared in the Late Late Show after the Supreme Court made their decision. And I read a letter that Mary had written herself. And in that letter, she said that the case wasn't about her. It was about the issue. And the reason that it wasn't about her is that Mary said that what she wanted, she could get. Because I had promised, or had not promised, but I had said that if she wanted to die, that I would help her.
Yeah.
What she was taking the case for was to protect me after she was gone. It's punishable. The assistance is punishable with a 14-year prison sentence.
Wow.
So that's what she was protecting. And the other thing was that she wanted to make what was available to her available to other people in her position.
Yeah.
So the case, as Mary said herself, was not about Mary. It was about the issue. It was about making it available for everybody else. And it was about protecting the people like me who are prepared to help the people they love to get what they want.
Yeah, it's a very brave thing for both parties. It's an incredibly brave thing for Mary to have thought about. But it's also a very brave and loving thing for somebody who loves their partner and is able to see beyond themselves.
But that's what love is, isn't it?
Step into the other person's shoes.
But to me, that's what love is.
Has it changed your views on our country, I suppose, as a country that would actually watch people suffer and not allow them to have this medical cannabis, but also not give them the right to leave this world the way they choose, not to be suffering unnecessarily?
It hasn't changed my views on the country because that's the way the country thinks. But what I'm trying to do is to change the views of the country. For both situations, and I'm not alone in either of those causes.
Yeah.
but what we're all trying to do now is to bring about a situation where both of those situations are rectified, where cannabis is made available for medical use without breaking the law, and also for the situation of a person in Mary's, that has Mary's views, will get the assistance that they need here in Ireland. I mean, every year we have lots of people travel to Switzerland from Ireland. Not many, it's not that well known. And particularly since Gail O'Rourke was prosecuted for helping her friend. She was prosecuted, but she was acquitted. But lots of people are traveling from Ireland, but not using Ireland as their address to protect the people that go with them, to protect the people that have possibly made the arrangements for them. And they're traveling to the UK and then from the UK on to Switzerland. So the statistics are completely warped about the people traveling to clinics in Switzerland because of that. But people are availing of it. They're going to that much trouble. So people do want this option. And also, the vast majority of people in the country, over 70%, in fact, the last poll that was done was 74%, on the Claire Byrne show, 74% of people said that this should be available for people. And if that's not, I suppose, an indication to the people who make legislation that this is something that should be looked at.
Do you think, Tom, that it should be available widespread insofar as that anybody who wishes to choose the way they die should be able to avail of it? Or do you think that it should be, say, specifically for people who are in intense physical pain or are terminal? Well,
that question is very easy to answer. It's already available. Since we decriminalize suicide, anybody. The only way that a person can be stopped from committing suicide is to prove that they're incapable of rational thought. It has to be the Mental Health Act that's brought in to prevent them from taking their own life. If they can prove that they are competent and that they're thinking rationally, there is nothing that the law or the state can do to prevent them taking their own life. So that's there already. It's how that happens. And the availability of assistance to people who, I suppose, in particularly like Mary's case, people who have got to the point because of an illness that their quality of life, it's not just about pain, it's not just about suffering, it's about quality of life and being able to decide when that quality has disappeared to the extent that life is no longer worth living.
I'm thinking, when I posed that question to you, I suppose I was thinking of people in situations, elderly people in homes, and that with certain family members who are feeling that they are a burden on their family member, or the family member is making them feel like they are a burden. So they feel that the only option is for me to die. Do you feel at that stage that there should be some kind of, if you like, a check, or is there a check that makes sure that these people are not making the choice because they're vulnerable, or they may want to live, they may desperately want to live, but they may be being pressurized by family members to feel, you're a total burden on the family, for financial gain, or the family might be very good to them, but they might feel that they're a burden unnecessarily.
I'll answer that question in two parts, if you don't mind. The first one is that it's an awful indictment on our society if people feel that society doesn't want them around, particularly their own family. And that's nothing to do with the right to die. That's an indictment on society and the way we treat people, the way we make people feel. And that's something that has to be separately addressed. But also, when you consider the number of unpaid family carers that exist in the country, I mean, we're well over 10,000 family carers in the country now. In fact, I think, and these are people who give up their own lives to look after people they love or people that they care for. And I don't mean care for in a physical sense, I mean care for. So I think that question is totally separate to the right to die. That's something that society needs to look at as to why we put that pressure on other people to feel that they shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
The second part of the question is, and I'll answer it by when John Halligan, some time back, I think John Halligan was it 2014, John put a bill in on assisted dying. I wrote the bill for John Halligan. Yeah. Well, with the assistance of 5 barristers who volunteered their time. Now, it took us the best part of 10 months to write that bill. The bit about assisted dying and about changing the law was very simple.
Yeah.
We did that in a week. We spent the rest of the time looking at safeguards to avoid exactly the situation that you're talking about. We spent 10 months building safeguards into the bill to try to avoid. Now it's impossible to avoid everything. Yes. Yeah, I mean, for instance, and I say this as well. I mean, it's illegal to commit murder. Yeah, but people do commit murder. Mm-hmm. So you're never going to prevent. There are always going to be people there that will circumvent whatever law exists. But you have to do your best to try to make sure that people are protected from other people. Hence laws that are there like murder and others, fraud and that sort of thing. Yeah. But as I say, we spent 10 months, 10 months less a week of that time building in those safeguards to try to prevent this from happening. So yes, I certainly feel that vulnerable people need to be protected. But there's all sorts of situations in society where vulnerable people need to be protected from, not just assisted dying.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. 100%, Tom. And, you know, you actually took part in Dicing with Death or Dicing with Dr. Death stand-up show with Philip Nitschke at the Edinburgh Festival. Tom, how did that happen? How did that happen?
It happened by accident, to be perfectly honest. Philip and I go around the world doing these workshops on exit workshops on assisted dying. And Philip is Australian, although his name is Austrian or German or something like that. His surname.
It's kind of like Nietzsche, but it's Nitschke.
Yeah, Nitschke, yes. But anyway, Philip has, well, what would I say? An Australian sense of humor. I won't be more insulting than that. Yeah. Whereas I think I have a good sense, an Irish sense of humor. So I tend to bring in a bit of humor into everything we do. And it bounces off Philip, the two of us, when we're working together. And somebody in the audience, or one of our members that was at our workshop in London, in Dragon Hall in London, said from the audience, Jesus, the two of you should do a comedy show together. And that's how it happened. We were having a pint that night, we were having a drink in the pub that night. And I said, well, what do you think of that, the idea of doing a comedy show? And we left it at that. And then Philip came back and said, gee, yeah, let's do that. And it progressed, or whatever you wanted to call it.
Organic.
Exactly. And then, well, what do we do with it now that we have it? And the idea of taking it to Edinburgh and was that when we run meetings or when we organize meetings, say in Dublin or anywhere, Melbourne or anywhere like that, the people that come along are people that have an interest in this subject. And what we were looking at was the idea of getting to a new audience, introduce this subject to get people thinking about it. And that's how the comedy show, and we did 29 nights. It killed us. 29 nights with one night of a break in Edinburgh. I don't know how we were still friends after that. I have no idea.
But Tom, that's fantastic. But that brings up another question that this show is all about. I just sit and listen to people. I don't have set questions to ask. My questions usually come from people, but you know, it brought up a very valid question. Now, I mean, again, when I look at the people I interviewed, a lot of Holocaust survivors would say, "Oh, you can't make fun of the Holocaust. You can't make such a serious subject." Some are against fictional novels. They only believe in factual. Others believe in fictional. Some believe in telling it through music, through plays, and through comedy, and others don't. What are your views about, I suppose, the importance of bringing such a such a strong emotional subject into the comedy sphere and into the theatrical sphere, do you feel it lessens it, or do you feel, as you said there, that it brings another audience? It continues the subject.
I certainly don't think it lessens the subject. And even on the subject of death, I think we have this morbid fear of death that people don't want to talk about it. People don't, avoid that subject completely.
Yeah.
And even other organizations that would disagree with my views on the right to die and that sort of thing, actively promote the idea of talking about death. You have death cafes around the place that, and they're not morbid. They bring people together to face the future, to face what is inevitable. You've got the Hospice Foundation with their Think Ahead program that think about, instead of dying and people not knowing what you want after that, like where do you want to be buried, what sort of songs do you want if you have a funeral, do you want to be cremated? Put it all in writing beforehand so that there's no ambiguity over things like that. So to me, certainly, no, bringing it into comedy only gets people that would never give some thought to this subject.
I agree 100% with you. I do.
Even that you mentioned earlier on that there's a play. In fact, the play had its premiere last Saturday. Here in Ireland, a play called Letting Go.
Letting Go.
That's written about Mary and myself.
Yeah.
And I was delighted when Cathy Ann Murphy decided to write the play on the basis that most people saw Mary as this poor woman in the wheelchair leaving the High Court that had an illness.
Her a very strong woman.
But she was such a strong woman behind that. And there was so much to Mary that people didn't know. And this gives an opportunity to get that out there.
Yeah.
And to get her views, her thoughts, her feelings, how we lived together, the good life we had together, but also the how when Mary's MS progressed, how that changed our life so much, how it dominated our lives. And there's thousands of people out there in similar situations that people just don't give any thought to. And the people's perception of Mary was this person who wanted to die. Mary wanted so much to live, but she wanted to live on her terms. And she didn't want to be nothing as far as she was concerned in life. And when life became nothing to her, she didn't want to live. And that was the difference. She was never suicidal. She loved life. She wanted to grasp life and go with it. And that's what I mean, that when we put our plan in place, that Mary could die anytime she wanted.
Well,
I
suppose in a sense, I've always been a great believer, I suppose, as someone who has been in the arts all my life, acting, and I spent 14 years in Bunratty Castle. And so the arts would be, and I'm an artist as well. So I see the importance of art in showing things that sometimes books can't do. Or if a child is too young to understand something, show it to them in a way that they are able to understand, whether it's through a play, through a piece of poetry, through a drawing, whatever helps them to actually engage with the subject. And I think, you're taking completely different avenues from the comedy to the theatre. The next thing, there'll be a film. Any chance of that coming on the horizon? Well,
when Mary's book was written, or when it was published, unfortunately, Mary never saw it in the shops. The printers or the publishers, Hachette, were wonderful people. And they, because Mary was getting very ill, if that's the way to put it, they rushed through they printed a single copy of the book. And it arrived the day after she died.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so she never saw the finished product. It literally arrived the day after she died. And it's in her coffin with her, that one copy of the book.
Wow.
But after the book was published, there were particularly companies from America that approached us or approached me about filming it or making a film of it. But I couldn't get them to commit to telling the story factually.
Yeah.
I was afraid that they would embellish it and they'd add to it that made Mary seem a different person altogether, or our life seemed different. So I couldn't get them to agree with that. They wanted the license to do whatever they wanted once we signed. So I refused to sign. So this play, I trusted the person who wrote the play to put forward an accurate prediction of us and our life. But it could have been in film, but I didn't trust the people.
And it might yet, because it depends on if you can get somebody that you can actually sit with and say, yes, that isn't the correct. You'd want to have. It's the same with me when I did my, where is it? I'm backwards. My book. That's my book. Yes. I'll never forget the day, the morning I got the book arrived. So I can understand how you felt. I mean, the feeling that I have in my hand.
Yes.
6 years work, and there's nothing explains it like just actually physically having it. But yes. I drove them mad in the publishers because I wanted complete autonomy over how I did the drawings, the artwork, everything for it. I think they were just glad to see the back of me at the end. But I think that that's what you should do, is to try find somebody that will actually take the project on, but on your terms.
I'd love to, yes. If there was, I mean, there probably is people, are people there, yeah. Trying to get my grammar.
Accuracy is so important.
Yes, and it would be lovely to see the story accurately told out there. Yes.
You know, it's just lovely, because people, I'm sure people watching on the TV and seeing Mary and you going in and out of courts and fighting constantly to try and get this bill passed. I'm sure people only saw the woman going in the wheelchair and the illness and two people maybe beaten down by life, if you like. But what they didn't see was the happy, joyful that the play shows, or that the comedy shows, that you can be joyful even in the saddest of times.
Yes.
You know,
and that's the bit that I could keep saying to people that Mary and I had a wonderful life together. Now, it was very difficult for Mary, particularly as things progressed, but we made the best of what we had. And that's what I want people to know, and that's what I want people to see, and hence the play and things, you know, and it would be lovely to get an accurate film done of it. Yeah.
I'm sure you could, and I'm sure, you know, I mean, I'm trying to think of the guy, the Irish guy that did the My Left Foot, was it? My Left Foot.
I wouldn't be knowledgeable in that sphere at all. So
he was the director of My Left Foot. I can't think of his name.
Well, I'm sure
Jim Sheridan.
Oh, Jim Sheridan, yes. Yeah.
Somebody like Jim Sheridan now would understand the importance to you of historical accuracy of Mary's story and your story with her. You should approach him.
Well, maybe it's something that now that the play exists, maybe it's something that I start working on again. Yeah.
That's what you should do. But Tom, what's the next stage now for Exit and for you and for medical marijuana?
Well, Exit, it exists. It's the same organization that it always was, even though it's getting stronger. It used to be based in Australia, which is where Philip was from, but Philip now lives in Europe. So most of our efforts are in the northern half of the world, between Europe itself and North America, between USA and Canada. So it continues to do what it's there for, which is provide information to people so that they can accurately make a decision for themselves.
Yeah.
Whether that decision being that they don't want this or whatever, the idea is to provide them with information so that they will have enough understanding to be able to make a decision for themselves. And that's the purpose of Exit. As far as Ireland and the right to die situation is concerned, Gino Kenny's bill was rejected last year. But in that, it was decided to set up a special committee to look at this whole area of assisted dying and concentrate, not going to the health committee or the justice committee, but a specific special committee to look at it. And that should be formed sometime this year. At the same time, there's huge support getting out there. There's an organization called End of Life Ireland. There's Right to Die Ireland. And one of the amazing things to me is there's a group called Doctors for MAID standing for Medical Assistance in Dying, MAID. And this is the first time that a group of medical professionals have come out in support of assisted dying. So there's a lot of activity going on in Ireland. We hope to try to put some pressure on this committee to listen to us properly and to listen to the people, to what the people want. 74% of people think that this is something that should be there. On the other side, on the medical cannabis side of things, all we can do, the medical cannabis access program is due for review this year, even though it's never really been put into place. It was based on a report back from from one of the committees in the Dáil, or in the Oireachtas, not just in the Dáil, between the Senate and the Dáil, and things like the fact that they dismiss completely the idea that cannabis has any space or place in chronic pain.
Crazy.
Absolutely crazy. I mean, that's one of the main uses of it around the world.
But
is in pain treatment.
You know, it's to do with finances.
Yeah, of course, the pharmaceutical companies. And they are now starting to get involved, which means
if they get involved, the price will go up.
Absolutely. And also, will it be the real product?
So you grow your own.
Will it be something made in a lab? Yes, that's what it should be. It is a plant. It's not something that's made in a lab. And what they will do is that they'll extract the bits of it and synthesize it, as is happening in Israel at the moment. They're synthesizing the THC and the CBD and the other ingredients. But we know, the people that are involved in it know that the only way it works properly is for what we call the entourage effect, the whole plant, and the hundreds of properties that are in that plant itself. But anyway, so we hope to influence the review of the medical cannabis access program, but also what I'd love to see is an education program for the medical profession. But unfortunately, that takes money. And we need people like the IMO to back that. And they don't seem to want to know.
Tom, do you think that, I don't know what I was going to say there. It was probably, as Mum would say, a lie. Yes. What I was actually going to say there was, do you think that there's a space now for a referendum on it, on both? I mean, the only way, if there's 71% are talking about assisted dying being made legal here in this country, and probably the same, probably even 100% are saying cannabis should be legalized for people, for medicinal. Doctors should be able to give it to you. You should be able to go into grow your own, as you say,
yes,
and whatever, for medicinal purposes. Do you think that the way to solve it would be a referendum? Let people have a vote. We're supposed to be a democracy.
Well, yeah, but to a certain extent, we are technically a democracy, and that's what we vote our people into Parliament for. That they are the legislators. We vote for them already.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was established, particularly in the Supreme Court on the constitutional part of it, and it was stated by the Supreme Court that there is no constitutional impediment in changing the law to allow for assisted dying. There is nothing in the Constitution to prevent it. So we don't need a referendum to change the Constitution, which is usually why we have referenda. That it is to change the Constitution because there is a constitutional block to doing something, like we had to do with abortion.
Yeah.
But there is no need for a referendum. But if a referendum is what's wanted, and the only reason that a referendum would be needed is if our legislators are not prepared to make the decision that we elect them there for, and they want to abdicate it to give the public the vote. And that to me would mean that the legislators are scared, that they don't want to make a decision on this unless the public tell them to. Which why are we bloody well voting for them if they're not prepared to take their responsibility? So neither of them need a referendum. They only need legislation to be made for both of them to be made available. And even on the medical cannabis side, I'm not even sure if legislation is needed. I think that back in Stephen Donnelly's days when he was, or it might have been even back in Varadkar's days when he was health minister, a statutory instrument is all that's needed. And I think that it was either Stephen Donnelly or Leo Varadkar that said that as Minister for Health, that we don't even need legislation. All we have to do is, well, one part of legislation needs to be changed, which is the criminal law justice, or criminal law, the Drugs Act, where cannabis is classified as a Class A drug, which is ridiculous.
I mean, even I understand that, you know, I mean, I wouldn't even know what it looked like or smelled like. I have a friend who often you'd pass in the street and he'd say, "Isn't that a lovely smell?" And I'd say, "What smell?" And he'd say, "There was somebody smoking cannabis there now, and they're obviously very calm." And
Yep.
I don't understand what the smell is, but I do appreciate the importance of how it can help people who really badly need any kind of a pain, whether it's a pain in your hip or a pain in your knee or whatever. If a plant can help you.
Yep. And well, again, coming back to my own experience with Mary, that the amount of painkillers that Mary was taking was frightening. Yeah. And the fact that a lot of them were opioid based meant that the side effects of those were probably worse than the pain itself. Now, I mean, I know that's probably, I can't judge what Mary felt as far as the pain is concerned. She tried to explain to me, but Mary had two types of pain: neuropathic pain, which was caused by the MS, which was just the nerves causing problems. And then she had physical pain as well, caused by things like the spasms and limb problems. But she was on a maximum amount of pain medication up to the time we started using cannabis, that if she took any more, she was comatose. So she had no life. And it still wasn't dealing with the pain, whereas the cannabis did. And it had no side effects. So, you know, how can they argue against that? And in those days, there were very little clinical trials or very little information as far as clinical trials were concerned. That information is there. It's come out of countries all over the world, including countries in Europe, and particularly Israel. Israel has done a lot of medical research into cannabis as a medicine. And the parts of America, Colorado and places like California and other places.
Some places in America that it's legal. You can go in Holland, I think you can go into cafes. Cafes and
that's more for recreational. There's no difficulty with that. The same applies in Spain, even though technically cannabis is illegal in Spain. They've brought in regulations that if what they call the cannabis clubs, if they adhere to specific rules, then they can provide for their own members. You have to be a member of the club. You have to be a member for 24 hours before you can enter and this sort of thing. Wow. But providing they stick to specific rules, then the clubs will be allowed to operate.
Tom, isn't it, when you think about it, isn't it insane that, you know, you look at alcohol and the damage it can do to the physical person as well as the family from an addiction to alcohol. The same with cigarettes, the damage that it does to people that are in the vicinity of someone who smokes.
Yeah, and the number of people who die.
Doesn't do it doesn't have any damage to me if I was sitting here with you and you were smoking. No.
The only thing that used to cause a problem is that for some reason Ireland and the UK, people that smoke cannabis used to mix it with tobacco. Now apparently it's the only place in the world where that happens, and people still mix the plant, you know, the dried plant in with tobacco. So they are smoking tobacco, which is harmful. But the cannabis part of the cigarette or the joint or whatever you want to call it is not harmful. Now, everywhere else they smoke it just as cannabis. But anyway, that's the only time that it's harmful is when you mix it with tobacco.
So, but on your play, that actually came out, didn't it, on Saturday, the 5th of March at the Whale Theatre in Dublin. Did it actually go ahead?
It did, yes. And we've 6 venues booked so far, and we're talking to about 10 other venues around the country. The next performance is next Tuesday, the 15th, in the Little Theatre in Gorey. And then I think it's the first week in April, we're down in Enniscorthy We're in the Mill Theatre in Dundrum. We're in the Mill House in Rush, the Civic. So that there's lots of venues around the country, and we're hoping to take it further out the country. But the difficulty at the moment is because theatres have just opened up. There's such a backlog of productions that were all cancelled, that we're finding it very difficult to get slots. The theatres want it, but they can't accommodate us until maybe the end of the year because of, as I say, of cancelled shows that are there already that are trying to rebook. But
and are you acting in it?
No. I was, for years I was involved in amateur drama.
I get that sense from you, Tom. From the moment I actually sat down to talk to me, you had that thespian look about you.
I'm not a thespian. The two things that I do as far as amateur drama is concerned is I do sound. Sound effects, and I manufacture sound effects for other theatre groups and things like that. And also I make sets.
Oh, lovely.
So what I say is the only time I'm ever on the stage is when I'm building it.
And leaving it. No, but I mean, you would
knocking it down. Yeah.
You would, you would have been the perfect person to play yourself in it, because I mean, you are confident on stage. You do a stand-up comedy or you do comedy.
Well, I think it would have been too emotional for me to do me. Pat Nolan of Fair City fame.
That's right.
Who lives in Wicklow as well, and is a good friend of mine. He plays me.
I actually saw the poster of it, and he actually looked a bit like you from the side, looking at the poster, and I thought, oh, maybe that's Tom actually playing himself in it. But
I think it would have been very difficult for me to play me. I think I might have broken down a few times, as I'm doing at every performance now.
Yeah.
And one of the other things is that after each play, we've got permission from the various theatres to do a question and answer session.
Oh, that's good. Bit like in the Actor Studio.
Yes.
That series that used to be on TV, and you just sit down and talk. So Tommy Reichenthal did that. Tommy is from Dublin as well. He did that after his documentary Close to Evil. It was a question and answers with the director and with him about the story behind it. Yeah, it's a great idea.
Well, it gives people an opportunity, as I say, to ask questions and have them answer. Well, hopefully we'll be able to answer them. But it's one of the things I will say is the purpose of the play is not campaigning for the right to die.
Yeah.
It's a love story.
Yeah.
And that's the way we want it to be seen. It's the story of our lives together. The good bits, the bad bits, how our lives were, I suppose, dominated by the fact that Mary had MS and how we dealt with that in everyday life. You know, just the ordinary things like in the kitchen making the dinner together, that sort of thing.
You know, it is a lovely story, Tom. It's a heartbreaking story as well, but it's, you know, it's primarily a love story.
Yes. And that's the way we want it seen.
You know, it is. I see it as a love story, and with every, I suppose, a love story, there's bitter moments, there's sad moments, but the joyful moments are actually or should supersede all of that.
Exactly. Really. That's what makes it worthwhile.
And it should. And what was I going to say? Well, Tom, thank you so very much for being my guest today. Your work is extraordinary, you know, it's a labor of love.
Well,
and long may it do you mind being called, before I go, do you mind always being referred to as Mary Fleming's partner?
Not at all. It's
almost like Mr. Fleming.
Yeah, I'm proud of it. It gives me great pride to be called Mary Fleming's partner.
That's lovely. Because, you know, sometimes someone, you know, I have always, most of my friends never call me Mary, they call me Mary Honan. Yeah. And if they're on the phone, they'll say, I'm here with Mary Honan. And I'm thinking, how many other Marys do you know? I'm always Mary Honan, never Mary, as if they knew about 10 others. So
sure, yes.
You're Tom Curren, the partner of Mary Fleming. It's just fantastic. Thank you so very much for giving of your time.
You're welcome.
Today, and continued success in everything you do. I must actually get to see your comedy show sometime.
Yes.
Well,
okay.
Shinderi Leshon Clor, that's the end of the show for today. Until the next time, Lacuna of Day. Bawalam Tugalir Chiacana, Sonas Agus Gra, I wish you peace, happiness, and love. Agus Gadesh of Slán. Slán, Tom.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.